Hello, I'm Josh George. This is Football Guy, college football predictions. So, I'm going to start, obviously, with Conference USA. I'm going to go in alphabetical order here, talk about each team's biggest strength, biggest weakness, and what I think the result will be for this season. So, FIU. FIU comes into the season bringing back 8 starters on defense. But they're a defense that allowed 37.2 points per game. Their biggest weakness is probably going to be their offense. Their offensive line had a couple guys go to the portal. Their starting running back is injured. Their only returning starter on that offensive line is Jacob Blake, who will be a senior this year. And like I said, they only allowed 18.7 points per game last season. Their biggest strength is the fact that they do bring back those starters on defense, and probably that they play Maine because they have a very difficult schedule with Conference USA, according to Conference USA standards. They just play a lot of teams that you think would be close games. They end up playing on the road, and then of course they play Arkansas there at the end of the year. That doesn't make it any easier. So breaking down their schedule, Louisiana Tech, how do they match up? Louisiana Tech is a team that is going to want to pass the ball. We'll talk a little bit more about why Louisiana Tech's going to want to pass the ball when I get to them. But FIU allowed 260 yards passing per game last season. I think that they will lose to Louisiana Tech. I think they will beat Maine. I'm going to go ahead and go on a limb and say I think they're going to beat Maine. North Texas is a tough matchup. A team that's just going to find ways to move the ball. And I think teams are going to find ways to move the ball. And if you're giving up 30 to 35 points a game, you're going to lose some games. So I think they're going to lose that game. Then UConn. UConn is actually revamping this year. They're trying to get to where they can move into a bigger conference like the Big 12. The Big 12 is trying to sell its basketball rights, and I think that they're really going to pack the place, and I think FIU loses to UConn. Then Liberty. I'm going to talk about Liberty and their new coach here later on. Going to talk about my biggest questions for them. If that offense is as creative as it was at Coastal Carolina, and if they're able to run the ball like they were at North Carolina, which I'll talk about when I talk about Liberty, I think they're going to be a pretty good team, and that'll be a hard game. I think they're going to end up losing that game. Then they, of course, go on the road to New Mexico State. New Mexico State was a solid bowl team. Their biggest problem is going to be lack of depth. So if FIU can keep throwing bodies at them, I think they're going to win that game. But because they lack a line depth, I think New Mexico State at home finds a way to win. So I have FIU losing that game. I also have them losing to UTEP and Sam Houston, 2 teams that I think are right on the cusp. I think at Sam Houston, I think that is just tough travel. You never know. A team gets out of its routine. Sometimes they find ways to lose games. It can make all the difference. Then they host JSU. I think they end up beating Jacksonville State. I think they end up winning a game that will probably be on ESPN Plus. I think a lot of their games will be this year. Then at Middle Tennessee and at Arkansas and at Western Kentucky, I think they end with 3 losses. Just not enough defense for the Panthers this season. So I have them 2-10 and 1-7 in conference play. Now, Jacksonville State. They're new to FBS college football and new to Conference USA. They return 6 starters on defense including the majority of their defensive line. Big plus. Cleared my throat. It's just the absolute worst. But they return the majority of their defensive line. They're actually going to be, they were actually pretty good last year, only losing 2 games. One of those losses was when Tulsa throttled them 17-54. And their offense ended up scoring 36.2 points per game. But will it translate? Anytime you move up a level, it's really, really difficult. The game gets faster. It gets harder to win. Because of that, I think, like I said, their biggest weakness is probably moving up. But they have the number 3 portal class in conference. And Rich Rodriguez, who has won 172 games. So, good coach, depth on defense, and returning quarterback Zion Webb. So they'll be able to win some games because their offense should be decent. They'll probably score 25 points per game now that they've moved up. And in their schedule, I have them beating UTEP, Eastern Tennessee, Liberty, Western Kentucky. So I have them 5-7 and 4-4 in conference play. Now with the Liberty Flames, look, Liberty Flames, they hired a new coach. They hired Jamie Chadwell, who was at Coastal Carolina. Well, Coastal Carolina was number 54, was 54th in the nation in rush yards per game. That would be second if you compared it to other teams currently in Conference USA. So I expect their rush game, I expect their little pass game to be pretty good. Their biggest question mark is Jonathan Bennett. Jonathan Bennett is a returning starter at Liberty. So will he be able to match with Chadwell's offense? The truth is, the Flames scored 27 points per game, 70th in the country. So that number almost has to go up if they're going to win the conference. And their defense only returns 4 starters, probably their biggest weakness. Now, when you look at their schedule from last year, they lost their last 4 games. Of course, their coach had decided to leave, so that may have played a role in that. But and the defense really struggled in those times closing out games. So that's my biggest question mark. Now that they've got those departures on defense, can they rebuild? Can they be back? Truthfully, when I break down their schedule, I have them beating Bowling Green, New Mexico State, Buffalo, FIU, Sam Houston, Middle Tennessee, Old Dominion, and UMass. So that puts them at 8-4 and 4-4 in conference play. Now to Louisiana Tech. Look, Louisiana Tech is going to be a decent team under Sonny Cumbie. I know he was only 3-9 in his first season, but that offense is totally revamped. They were 32nd in the nation in passing yards per play. And Sonny Cumbie is going to be a big strike guy. They pulled 2 receivers from the portal, and they have 2 wide receivers coming back. Now, their receivers on their 40-yard dash average a 4.45 in there, so they're fast guys. Let me just say it that way for those of you that don't understand the 40-yard dash. They have fast wide receivers. So lots of speed, lots of big playability. In a team that was decent there last season. Of course, their biggest minus was the fact that the defense allowed 37.9 points per game, 127th last season, worse than FIU, just in conference comparison. But they bring in Hank Bachmeier to run this offense from Boise State, a guy that already has 6,000 plus passing yards in college football, 41 touchdowns, and of course started at Boise State as a freshman. So we know that Hank's a superstar and he fits really well with Sonny Cumbie. And I think it's just going to be that kind of thing that ends up turning around this team. And I think they're going to be a team that is really good on offense, but maybe gets in a lot of shootouts and end up losing some games for that reason. But I have them beating FIU. I have them beating Northwestern State. I have them beating Western Kentucky. I have them beating New Mexico State. I have them beating Sam Houston and Liberty, Sam Houston, and Jacksonville State to close the year. Let's see if I got that all in there. I have them winning FIU, Northwestern State, Western Kentucky, New Mexico State, Liberty, Sam Houston, and Jacksonville State, which would make their record 7-5 and 6-2 in conference play. Moving on to Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee starts out on the road against two SEC teams, so that's a very difficult schedule. And of course, Frank Pleasant is going to be a huge factor at running back as he's only a junior this year, 5'10", 240 speedster. And of course, he's going to be alongside wide receiver and really just, if he was in high school, he'd be considered an athlete. DJ England Curriculum. So, decent athletes on offense there. And of course, an offense that was 61st in the nation in scoring offense. They averaged about 4 touchdowns a game. So, they're going to probably end up being okay there. A defense that was 129th in pass defense, but 22nd in rush defense. So a topsy-turvy defense. You can lock down the run game, but if they're going over the top, you're probably going to lose. That could be a concern. It could lead to little matchup nightmares. Look, when I think about this Middle Tennessee team, my mind just about immediately goes to how are they going to do with their 5 starters back on offense and 7 starters back on defense? Are they going to be able to gel? It actually seems like a good number with portal days. I have them at 6-6 and 5-3. I have their 6 wins being Colorado State, Jacksonville State, Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State, UTEP, Colorado State, Jacksonville State, Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State, FIU, and UTEP. So there you go, 6-6 and 5-3. Now New Mexico State. New Mexico State's an interesting team that ended up making a bowl game last season, and they have 9 starters back on offense, and one of the easier schedules according to Conference USA standards. They have a tough game, of course, in the non-con against Auburn, but they actually end up playing 13 games. They get to start out with UMass and Western Illinois, 2 games that are likely wins for this team. And of course, Jerry Kill took them to a bowl game in his first year. He's got Tim Beck conducting this offense just to move the ball, find a way to score games. But they were -5 in the turnover margin last season. That's tied for 100th. So going to have to do better at taking care of the ball. For New Mexico State, like I say, they've just got to find a way to win 6 games to get to a bowl game, and something tells me that with Jerry Kill and this schedule that they can find a way to do that. I actually have them 6-7 and 3-5 in conference play. I've been beating UMass, Western Illinois, New Mexico, FIU, Sam Houston, and JSU, which puts them at 6-7 and 3-5 in conference play. Now to Sam Houston. Sam Houston is a team that only scored 18 points per game in FCS play last year. So they're new to FBS college football and are projected by Lindsay to be the worst team in the nation. Now, the reason I don't think they will be that bad is because their defense. Their defense only allowed 20 points per game last season. That is huge. They also have KC Killer, who has 250 at head coach, who has 259 wins. Because of those 259 wins, you got a solid head coach. They're trying to pull guys through the portal. They've got a senior quarterback in Keegan Shoemaker back, so they're not going to be all that bad. They'll be really good on defense, but if you struggle to score, you are going to struggle to win games. But they're what I call a building project, a team that I think can get on the right track. It really does come down to, can they win some of those home games in Huntsville, Texas? Now, I have them 4-8 and 3-5 in conference play. I have them beating Jacksonville State. I have them beating FIU. I have them beating Kennesaw State. And I have them beating Middle Tennessee for that senior night. Now, to UTEP. UTEP. The Miners were, of course, a ground and pound team. Danny Dimmel has already talked about trying to air it out more with Gavin Hardison returning at quarterback. Now, they did lose a receiver and an offensive lineman and some starters to the portal to big teams like Florida State and A&M. But the big deal for them is, can they end up raising the number of 200 yards per game in the pass in the pass game for Hardison to about 300 yards per game? If they do that, then this team will end up winning a lot of close games. But their defense allowed 27 points per game, and they had some of the most turnovers in all of Conference USA last year. So too many turnovers on offense, not enough turnovers on defense. You can look at that stat either way. And it just really comes down to, can Hardison up his game? I have UTEP at 7-5 and 5-3. I have them beating Incarnate Word. I have them beating UNLV, Louisiana Tech, FIU, New Mexico State, Sam Houston, and Liberty. And then, of course, Western Kentucky. Well, Western Kentucky has had one of the best offenses in the nation. In fact, they were second in passing offense in the nation last year, and have been in the top 10 for the past 3 years. And they've had head coach Tyson Helton for 4 years, and he's 32 and 21 overall as head coach. And my biggest question is, will he be there next year? And how will the defense do? They only have 3 starters back on defense, which is not a lot, but they are a defense that gets a lot of turnovers. Their margin ended up being plus 10, 17th in the country. They're kind of a bend but don't break defense, as they allowed an average of 383 plus yards per game last year. So, kind of trying to keep things between the 20s and see what can happen. Maybe we can get a turnover kind of a defense. But Austin Reed is a returning quarterback, and of course, he's got his number 1 target back, Michael Corley. So, and most of his O-line is they bring back 3 of offensive linemen, and all 3 total in the 300-pound range. So, huge things for them. I think the schedule kind of shakes out nicely. I have them 9-3, 6-2 in conference play. I have them beating South Florida, Houston Christian, Troy, Middle Tennessee, Liberty, UTEP, New Mexico State, Sam Houston, and FIU. Then the conference championship game, the way it would play out with the standings, La Tech would play Western Kentucky. And I think this will be on December 1st, which is a Friday, at around 5 p.m. Central Time, and it'll be an air raid game. Sonny Cumbie and all those receivers, and of course Western Kentucky, one of the best passing games in the country, and it has Group of 5 potential to go to a big bowl game, maybe even New Year's 6. You're going to just about have to get 10 wins there. So Western Kentucky would have to win the shutout on a Friday game. And I just feel like they're going to do it. And because they have just that turnover mindset on defense, I have them winning the conference, going 10-3, and sending La Tech to 7-6. This was Josh George and Conference USA from Football Guys Channel.